Morning everyone, Angus Campbell here. It's Wednesday the 28th of August, and today I'm going to begin to focus on the barrels and pistons for the Fury. The reason being that although when my engineering friend was kindly undertaking some machining jobs on this motor, he did fit and bore the liners, the cylinder liners, into this barrel for the two pistons here, which are standards. But it, on fitting, attempting to fit, it was a bit tight. So what I've done is taken the barrel off and the pistons, just to do some test fitting separately prior to us undertaking then any honing, a hone for which we received recently, although I'm still waiting for the bore dial gauge, bore measuring gauge, which is due to arrive today. Anyway, what we've found is that the pistons do actually fit, but they're a little snug. However, in removing one of the piston rings, and as you can see they're putting one of the rings into the barrel, can't see that too well, but there's a ring in there square, as you can see, and actually there's where the ring gap is, there's actually no gap whatsoever. I'm sorry you can't see that very well there, but there's absolutely no gap there whatsoever. And for a bore of this size, you can just see there's the ring ends there touching with no gap. And what we need to do for a bore of this size is we need to aim for a gap, I think, of around about 10 thou inches, but I can't get any gauges down there at all. So what I want to do next is, well, firstly, when we get the bore gauge, we'll measure the size of the bores. I've got a vernier to measure the diameters of the piston, and again there's a formula we can use to determine what tolerances we should try and achieve between the piston and the bore, and in this case I believe it's going to be 7 thou, and I think they're a bit tight at the moment, the pistons, although the engineer did do some expansion tests on these, and they both the bores and the pistons do expand at the same rate under heat, so we shouldn't have too much of a problem. But certainly we've got a problem with the rings there. The rings are too tight. So what I'll do next, in preparation for us waiting for the bore gauge, so we can begin honing these to the right diameter, and also ensuring that we get a ring gap, then I'm going to do a test fit of the barrel onto the crankcases over here, to ensure at least the barrel fits okay. I'm sure it does, because it was already it's already been sat on here without the pistons in, so I'm sure that's fine. So I don't think there's any problem there with respect to the barrels going over the studs and into the crankcases. I think the problem when we experience some tightness with the pistons on the rods is because these pistons are too tight in the bores with the rings on. Also, as well, in looking at these bores, they've been very finely rebored to a certain diameter, and we definitely need to achieve, I think, some more cross hatchings though in there with the hone, to ensure that the rings bed in when we start to run this motor. So first things first, let's just do a quick test fit of that barrel back onto the crankcases just to make sure there's nothing obvious going on there. The other thing just to point out with the barrels as we're here at the moment is that there is no head gasket fitted on the Fury. We have sealing rings, and there they are, that fit it into the groove between the lip of the liner and the barrel bore. And they sit, you can't see that too well, but they do sit proud, so that they then become squashed when the head's torqued down onto these, as the other side of the head has just a smooth, flush, flat surface, as you can see there. So let me just test fit the barrel, and we'll see where we go from there. Okay, no problem. The barrel tapped on there. Sorry, the barrel slotted in there onto the studs with the liners going into the crankcase is not much of a problem really. Just a few light taps with a mallet, and it's seated properly on the base, so that's not too much of an issue. So we can deduce from that with the fit with the pistons. Then the pistons were a little tight in the bores, the pistons or the rings probably. So we'll await the receipt of the bore gauge, and then we'll begin the honing process, and I'll bring you back when we begin that. Okay, hi again everyone, Angus Campbell here. It's nearly actually it's over a week later since the last clip, and that's because we've been waiting for some other tools and implements to arrive, and they now have arrived. So first of all, there's the hone. Secondly, there's a bore dial gauge, and then finally, you can't quite see it, but at the back over there, there's an ultrasonic cleaner that's arrived, quite a large one, 30 litres, which will enable me to get crankcase halves in, as well as barrels and heads for cleaning purposes. So now that those have arrived, we can crack on with both the Fury SS and also, under a separate video, the A70 Lightning. But we'll carry on now with the barrels on the E35SS. And firstly, what I've been doing in the meantime is measuring bores and pistons and checking ring gaps. And I've got you set up here looking at the Fury barrels. This is the left hand side, right hand side, and what I've got in front, which you can just see there, are the pistons. And as I've said before, I think, then when I tried to test fit the barrel over the pistons and rings when the pistons were attached to the rods, then the barrel appeared to be very tight. If I fitted the barrel without the pistons, then the barrel slotted into over the studs and the crankcase very well, so that's not the issue. But what I have found is that firstly, the two pistons are not exactly the same size, which is normal. There's 2 or 3 thou difference in the diameter. And secondly, what I've found as well is that these bores have been bored to match the pistons, and originally I had the pistons the wrong way around, so I've now managed to match these up, left hand piston, left hand bore, etc., and they do fit with a little more clearance. But what I have found is we've got problems with certainly one of the piston compression rings. So if I just put the torch on so you can see a little better, I've got the top compression ring sighted in squarely in the bores now, And you can see with the left hand one, which is here, you might just be able to see that the ring gap is at the bottom here, and I can just slot in there, if you use the right hand, there, but can just slot in there a 10 thou feeler gauge. So that's correct, because that's the clearance that we're aiming for, that we've calculated based upon this bore size and a formula that you can pick up from the net. That there's no specifications regarding these within the handbook, and there is no workshop manual, so we've nothing to refer to, but based upon information that's widely available on the net, then you can calculate a ring gap, optimal gap, based upon the bore size, and it's around about 10 thou for this, so that's good. However, on the right hand side, there's actually an overlap. That ring is obviously far too big, and there's a fairly significant overlap there, and I'm just wondering whether that's actually a ring for an oversized piston. It's not the correct ring. So what I'm going to do first then is to check the second lower compression ring on both of these pistons in these bores, and also compare these with other standard pistons and rings that I have to make sure we've got the right rings first, and if we have, then there's no reason why we can't obviously grind down the end of one end of this ring to get a gap if we do that carefully. But I'm pretty sure, based upon the overlap that's there, which is fairly significant, then that to me looks like a plus 20 ring. The pistons are correct. These are both standard pistons with the same part number, 711317. So those are both correct. So what I'll do now is I'll just do a bit of jiggery pokery, check the other rings, dig out another standard piston, because I've got plenty in stock with rings, and that's the obvious reason why we're having difficulty fitting the barrels over the pistons with the rings, is because the rings are going to be far too tight, and without the correct gap, and certainly with no gap, there's a strong risk of seizure. So let me go and dig out a couple of the pistons and rings, check the other two rings too, and I'll bring you back once I've got the other two rings in. So just to show you that within the parts book, then in the introductory pages, it does provide a page of what they call the piston and ring chart, which show you the individual part numbers and oversizes. And as we said, so 711317 is standard, but then we've got the oversizes as well. And I do have a box of rods and pistons, etc. Some of these are labelled, so for instance that is plus 10, but actually if we look at the part number, then it's 712141, which in the parts book then confirms that as plus 10. I do have some other standards as well. You can't see the numbering on these, but there's no rings on them. And also have in its original box, I have plus 20s, and checking the number on the top of these pistons is correct. Plus 20 is 712142, and those do have rings, but they're no good to us. However, I've got other pistons wrapped, and these have rings, and I believe these two, although they're a little more corroded, believe these are correct 711317, but let's just clean the tops off, make sure they are, and then at least hopefully we've got a good set of rings with those. Yep, these all good. 711317. Can't quite see in the glare there, but there it is, 731317. So those are both standards. So we've got another set of rings that we can compare. So what I'm going to do is, I mean, it would be straightforward to just fit these pistons, assuming these rings are correct. However, we know that no two piston is identically the same because of course casting, shrinkage, etc. And because the barrels have been bored for these two pistons, then I'm actually going to probably swap the rings. But first of all, we'll just do some top ring testing, first compression ring testing of one of these two in that right hand bore to see if we get the correct gap, or certainly a better position than the one that's in there, which is I think you can see there now that there's an overlap. So let's get these additional rings in. Let's do a test. Okay, after a bit more test fitting then. So this is the piston that we want to use, the left hand piston, which we think has the incorrect rings, and on checking the second compression ring and the oil ring, which I have in there at the moment, there's an overlap. So that set of rings is definitely incorrect. Those are oversized rings on a standard piston. And what I've done is I've taken a ring off the other set of standard pistons that I've got, and that one fits well. The gap's not quite 10 thou, but at least there's no overlap. So what I'm going to do is remove the other two rings, check those as well, transfer them onto that piston, and then I think we'll be good. And then what we're going to be doing is honing these out a little. So at the moment, having measured the bores and the pistons on each side up with the vernier, there's about a 3 to 4 thou clearance in diameter. So we can go, according to sort of standard calculations on this size of bore, we can go anything up to 6 or 7 thou. So we've got a bit of room to manoeuvre with respect to honing to make sure these are a little rougher with a diamond honing pattern so we can run the rings in correctly. But also, once we've honed out, we'll check the ring gaps again, and if we do need to just take a little off the ends of the rings on this side just to ensure we've got a 10 thou gap, then we can, but I don't think we'll need to do that. So that's where we'll leave it for this video for now, and what we'll do in the next episode is we'll get into using the hone, setting that up and getting these barrels honed out a thou or two on each side, and then we'll check the rings again. But for the first fit, at least we found what could have been a serious problem, and we can now ensure that one, we've got the pistons on the correct sides for the bores, and secondly, we've got a correct set of standard rings on those with what hopefully will be the correct ring gap. Okay, everyone, we'll leave it there, and I'll post this up now. So as it's been a while since I've posted a video, so at least you can see some progress. And what we'll do in the next couple of days is we'll come back and get that barrel honed out, and then hopefully we'll be able to do a final test fit, and then all that will leave us to do on the Fury SS motor is to fit the timing cover with its oil seal, and then we'll be ready for a strip so we can do the final build and start putting the engine into the rolling chassis. So beginning to make some progress. So apologies again for a little bit of time since the beginning of this episode and the end of it with respect to the clips, but now we've got all the tools together, we can finish this side of it off. Thanks very much for watching, everybody, and see you again soon.